It's loose on the airline there, but it's still more narrow than the brass fitting, so I can use my vice grip, use my whole hand to pull the vice grip.
Okay, so today I'm going to be replacing the parking brake valve on this 2004 International 7400. This is a very easy job. It doesn't require any special tools. I would call it a 3.5 out of 10 for difficulty. I think just about anyone with a driver's license could do this. First, you need to find the source of the leak. There are a few valves that exhaust behind the dash. You have your power divider, trailer supply, your brake cans can leak back up through this valve. You have your fifth wheel slide sometimes, axle lockers, inner axle lock. All of these things can leak back up through the dash and make a hissing sound. One thing you can do to eliminate parking brake cans is to go around and pinch off the rubber lines going to the parking brake under the truck one at a time and see if the leaking stops. If the leaking stops, it's probably your can. You can also try tapping on the valves at the back of the truck. Just follow your airlines up, tap on them with something hard like a vice grip. If it stops, it might be that valve, but make sure if your parking brake is released and the truck's full of air that the tires are chocked. I can't stress enough, make sure your tires are chocked. You can see there that I removed the cowling just by using a flathead screwdriver to pry it away. Then I removed the junk tray. Once you're this far, it's a good time to air up the truck and make sure that the leak is actually coming from that valve. A little bit of soapy water in a spray bottle will help you find air leaks in the dash. Next, you're going to want to remove these 4 screws. I believe these were a T27 Torx. They might be a Phillips or something else.
It leaks worse when the parking brake is off. It's still leaking air through here. That was super simple. These are pretty easy to get off. You just grab them and turn them. Ooh, look at that.
Before you go removing the airlines, you want to get some sort of a witness. I would normally take a picture, but I was using my phone to make this video. If you don't have a camera, you can use a scratch piece of paper, or as you can see here, I used the box. I also drew a diagram showing the 4 hoses going into the back of the valve, and then I just marked them with an initial, and I drew an arrow to the color just to help me out. You never know when I could get called out and be gone for a month, and someone else would have to finish this job. So you want to make it easier for that guy and easier for yourself. The more marking, the better. When it comes to removing these quick release airlines, the first thing you want to do is drain all of the air out of the truck. Imagine trying to take a tire off the rim when there's 100 pounds in it. The extra air in that airline is going to cause it to swell and make it harder to get out of that ferrule. There's a good chance that by the time you get your hands back in there, you're not going to be able to see what you're doing. You'll be doing most of this by feel, but it's pretty easy. You just use the pads of your finger to pull up on that ferrule, shove the airline in to help collapse the ferrule, and then pull it back out. If you struggle, I'm going to show you coming up here one way that you can get a lot of extra grip on that little ferrule ring.
Hey, you can see that the line here, and I don't know what this is called, a ferrule ring. So what you do is I'm grabbing this green line, I'm shoving it in, it pushes that ferrule in, and then I'm grabbing this ring, and just stuffing the pad of my fingers on both sides to hold it in, and then pulling back out on the green again. So you make this here a little bit bigger than the plastic hose. Just a little bit. You don't want to be gripping on that plastic hose. You just want this enough to where the pliers will kind of lock back. But here, let me bring in. It's loose on the airline there, but it's still more narrow than the brass fitting, so I can use my vice grip, use my whole hand to pull the vice grip into the valve body there, and then use my other hand to pull back and pull that green hose out. But that's what I do if they get stubborn.
The last 2 airlines on this valve fought me more than normal. I really don't like to cut these lines because they're the original lines on the truck, and they just get shorter and shorter and shorter every time you have to cut them. But I'm also at work, and time is a thing, so I decided that I was just going to cut them off, and I cut them off flush. If you get to the point that you're going to cut these airlines off flush, just remember it may not actually be that valve that's bad. And if you cut them off flush, that valve that might still be a good spare will now be junk because you really can't get the line out once you cut it off flush. Now, if you cut it off and leave yourself an inch, something to grab onto to try and get it out, well, then you're shortening that factory truck airline even shorter. I believe this valve here was about $200 before tax. So if that's not what's wrong, it'd be really nice if you could take it back and get your money back for this valve. So if you cut them off flush like this, just know that you're not going to be able to return it if that's not what's wrong. You want to compare the new valve to the old valve and make sure you got the right one. If your truck does have a trailer supply line, there will be a lot more airlines going to it in the back.
In green, let's look at my diagram. Orange and green is next to that.
Next, you want to reinstall the airlines. To reinstall the airlines, you want to firmly insert the airline into the fitting. You should feel it seat. Then you want to pull back on the airline and just make sure it's seated and won't come out.
Let's start it up and see if it leaks. Put this back in there. Alright. Oh, gotta put this fancy cover on.
It's pretty self-explanatory from here. You just put your 4 Torx back in, make sure they're good and tight. Don't forget to put your junk tray back in. Then just snap your cowling back in, and she's good to go. Oh yeah, don't forget your yellow knob.
So we're at 120. It's not leaking. It tells me it was the actual parking brake valve. It wasn't an air can. But yeah, like I said, you go under there and you start pinching the rubber lines and see if the leaking stops in the cab. And then if, say, one is you pinch a can line and it stops leaking in the cab, replace that first. It's going to have to be replaced anyways. This was $250.
They sell rebuild kits for these valves, but it's just not worth it because sometimes the rebuild kits don't work. And then you're sitting there wondering what else it could be, and it was just a rebuild kit. So that's why we opted for a new one. Pretty easy stuff, I have to say. If you're wondering how to find the right part for your vehicle, you want to call the dealership with your VIN number. If you have a motorhome, you want to know who built the chassis. When you call the dealership, you can ask for a part number, and they'll usually give it to you. You can go on Amazon or look on other parts stores online and see if you can save yourself some money. But you should always call around because usually the first price isn't the cheapest. If you're someone attempting this for the first time and you have questions, feel free to message me in the comments, or on Instagram you can direct message me, and I'll do the best I can to help you out. I appreciate your time.